my segment here, as we've got retired squadron leader Tim Davis of His Majesty's Royal Air Force with us today, I thought it would be crazy not to talk about the RAF a little bit and the crisis in it. Earlier this morning we recorded an interview, a 2-hour interview, where we dive into it in quite a lot of detail. Still not enough detail. Would have liked 5 or 6 hours, to be perfectly honest. But in this segment, we're going to scrape the surface on it. Before we get into it, I do have to do a quick shield for FCR, Father Calvin Robinson, who has joined us here at the Lotus Eaters with his Common Sense Crusade, which is, I understand, is going to be a weekly thing live. And so he's with us now. So check that out. And the first one went up yesterday, right? And you can use a code Crusade to get 50% off if you want to become a Gold Tier member, which I do recommend, obviously. So you get loads of stuff. If you become a member, you get access to literally hundreds of hours of me talking to Carl about history, if that's your thing, or Josh talking about psychology or whatever. Stelios talking about philosophy, or Dan Tubb talking about economics. All right, anyway, chill over with. Let's talk about the RAF. The big story, isn't it, is that they've gone down the DEI route, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and obviously with something as serious as flying aeroplanes, all sorts of airplanes, not just fast jets, something as sort of serious as that, it's kind of, it needs to be a meritocracy, right? You can't pick people on the strength of how much melanin they have or haven't got in their skin, right? You can't just insist that they've got to be 20% women for the sake of it. It has to be a meritocracy. You should have to pick the best people, whoever they are, whether they are a woman or an ethnic minority or anything. And they don't seem to be doing that. For example, John, if you could put just bring up that first little that first link. And so on the Royal Air Force website, there's a whole thing about. Oh, you're scrolling down.
I'll do it. Don't worry.
If you scroll down a bit, you'll find that quite quickly you come up to a diversity and inclusion bit. Keep going. There you go. There's a bit, and you can click into that, and there's more to be read. And they're just absolutely committed to having less white men, because that's what it boils down to, isn't it? You talk about women, you talk about ethnic minorities. What it really is, the flip side of that coin is less white men.
That's what diversity means.
Right. And they did it, and they spent few million on the initiative, and they did it, and then they got in trouble because it came out in the wash that it just wasn't okay to do that, and all sorts of stuff. So, yeah. Tim, if you want to...
Yeah, I mean, that's Tori, the Typhoon pilot there. I trained Tori.
Really?
Yeah, Tori's one of mine. She's on course 1 going through fast jet training. She's lovely. And Tori's no different because she's a girl. The difference with Tori, because she's a girl, is that I think she has had a child now. Women do get pregnant. Shock horror. The real women, not the new women. But the real women do get pregnant and they do have children. And the issue being is that what Mike Wigston, who's the Chief of the Air Staff, was saying was that he wanted 40% women and 20% minorities in the Royal Air Force by 2030, which is a huge, and it came out of nowhere. That figure was...
Well, that's an arbitrary number.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything. Right? Now, Rich Knighton, who's the new Chief of Air Staff, hasn't pushed that. He hasn't said anything. He hasn't said he's not going. He hasn't said anything about it. But my issue, the only way you can do that, if you accept diversity, then you will have to sacrifice meritocracy. And if there's a meritocracy, it's one that flies these airplanes right here. Okay. I mean, I trained Tori for a long time. She was an absolutely fine student, no issues with Tori whatsoever. She was on a course with 3 men, course of 4. The very first course you put through on the Hawk D2, all of them went on to F-35, Typhoon. They all did really well. She was no different to any of them, apart from the fact that we know at some point, I remember Tori, well, let's not talk about Tori because it's Tori, isn't it? I remember one of the conversations was, when do women have children? Can they do it in flying training? Because flying training is almost 7 years, long time. It should be 3.5, but the way we privatized, we didn't, but when flying training was privatized, it did take a lot longer to get these people through for many, many reasons. And we're saying, look, you've got to do it as soon as you get on the front line if you want kids, because a lot of these women are getting into late 20s, and one of those kind of things that we tell women is, you can have everything, can't you? Well, try and have a kid in your late 20s. It's much easier when you're in your early 20s, because that's when you're most fertile. And these women aren't stupid, they're clever. They know that the longer they leave it, the harder it's going to be, especially when you're throwing your body around in a fast jet that your body's not supposed to be in. Anybody's not supposed to be in it. You've got massive cortisol rise. Your body's not in a nice condition to have kids and get pregnant. So it's not the easiest thing to do in the world, either for men or women. I mean, I haven't got any kids and I've flew for 20 years, you know what I mean? But that is sometimes a blessing. Although, you have some silly animals instead that you're knocking about the house. So, when you do push for that level of diversity, when you do push for 40% women, you have to acknowledge the fact that they are going to have children at some point. Some of them. you can work out the percentage. It's going to be the majority, isn't it? I think it's only 25% that don't have kids. One of them, which is my wife, of course. Now, if you do that on a squadron with these airplanes here, you've got 15 Tories and Tonys, whatever, on a squadron. So you've got 15 pilots on a squadron. I worked it out with some A-level rudimentary maths. If you have half of that squadron as women, which you don't have at the moment, if you do, you need the squadron to be 1.3 times the size. Where's that money coming from? Because it's expensive. So we're playing around with shit that you don't want to mess around with. If you mess around with it, you have absolute failures. And right now, we've got 3 people leaving the military for every 1 person joining. Unsustainable. Literally, that should be a criminal act. People should be locked up for allowing that to happen. I've campaigned against this for about 4 or 5 years now. I was cancelled. I mean, I lost a job in 2022 for putting videos up about, where are we now? 2022. For putting videos up about this, about diversity in the Air Force, and saying, hang on a second, guys, you're messing with something. It's not the post office. It's not B&Q, not McDonald's. You mess up that, you get your little hamburger all kind of crafty off to one side. Understand that. No one's dying. People are dying. And one person who's going to die is a student I train called Tori. So we have to be very careful when we start messing around with diversity, because you can't unpeddle it. You can't go, let's unwrap that and go back to the way it was, Tim. Well, they're trying to now, because they're trying to get guys like me back into the service. The United States Air Force is doing that as well. The Royal Air Force is doing it on a reserve service liability commitment, where because you've been in, I think, for 6 years, if you're under a certain age, you don't run your own business and stuff like this, you haven't previously been alcoholic, that also helps. They might have you back. So I'm pretty safe. But they will bring you back. And they are bringing back some administration branches that have left back into the service because they cannot get people back in. And we're going to see it soon, I think, with this conscription thing that's being pushed at the moment. I think they're doing that for a reason, so that you can start saying, well, we've got a reserve liability commitment. We can shore up these billets that are not there anymore. Because the thing about people like Tori, and as lovely as she is, once you've had a child, the last thing you want to do is put your body back in a fast jet. I know men that don't want to do that after they've had kids, because things change, don't they? I mean, you guys might have kids, I don't know, but things change. The last thing you want to do is go and fly around the Welsh hills with things that can kill you, or go and live on a tanker in the dark above North Syria, where if you land, they're going to chop your head off. Your partners don't like you doing that. I remember my mum saying, when Kenneth Bigley was killed out in Iraq, I was over the top at the time. And she wrote me a letter, because back in those days, it was easy to do that. And she said, is that going to happen to you when you're shot down? Or are we going to see you on TV with your head cut off? Valid. That's my mum saying that. It's valid. Do you imagine what her husband's actually a fast jet mate as well? But can you imagine what her husband thinks when she's out there, or she thinks when he's out there? You don't want that life. It's not a nice life. Being a fast jet mate takes a long time, and it's something you have to think about the whole time, and it takes up 24 hours of your day. It's not a nice thing to do. And then to know that you're doing it with people that may not be the best people, but they've got the right skin color. I mean, come on. I mean, we're fucking around with some serious shit right now, and we shouldn't be. And people will die because of it. So are we waiting for that death to happen? Because we can do that as well. But it might be your family that has that, because it's also going through civilian aviation as well, especially in America. There's a court case against the FAA to do with air traffic control, where they were telling minorities what to fill in on the application so that they could see the application and go, that's a minority, let's take that application forward. That's going through at the moment. It's quite a sad thing, really, because we think a lot of it, from what I'm reading, people didn't really realize what they're doing. This is the problem. People think they're doing something positive with diversity. But as we talked about earlier,
you end up killing people.
What you're saying is, let's bring that guy in because he's black, not because he's better or worse. It's so humiliating for someone that the only reason you're getting this job is because you're a woman. And by the way, Tori was in a long time before this happened. I mean, I've seen good pilots in my time, and Tori's up there with really good pilots, really good students, really good pilots. I wouldn't say it if she wasn't, you know what I mean? But so she really is. So luckily, in fast jet aviation, we're still in a position that if you're not good enough, one or two things happens. Guys like me just put you on a different aircraft type, like a multi-engine or a helicopter, and you're going to be a lot safer there. That's just how it works out. Or you die. So you don't get to the front line, but you might kill people in the process of dying. You might land on an orphanage or some shit like that, you know what I'm saying? But the truth is, you won't complete your training if you're not good enough.
And there's a secondary point to it that, of course, there's the individual lives of pilots on squadrons and the people they share the immediate airspace with. But then there's also the question of the defense of the nation is compromised as well, which obviously is extremely concerning.
Why are we happy to allow that?
Why on earth would we do it? You mentioned Mike Wigston, used to be, quite recently, he's been changed as a chief air marshal. Right. But, where this has come from, where it comes directly from politicians, from Parliament, from senior ministers, from the Ministry of Defence, from the Cabinet Office, it goes down until the RAF itself is forced, or they deliberately pick someone like Wigston, or in other ways, in one way or another, they're forced to do DEI stuff, diversity and inclusion stuff. And it's, to anyone in their right mind, it's madness, right? It's crazy. Like you said about, okay, do it in McDonald's and you get a burger that's a bit of a mess. Big deal, really.
You go shop somewhere else.
But like, it doesn't put a nation's security at risk. It
Unless
doesn't put
you want
people's
to.
lives at risk.
Unless you want to.
So it's very deliberate.
Well,
It
here's
seems
the
to
thing.
me very deliberate. It's not by accident the RAF is suddenly.
No, I think it's
But what-
deliberate as well. So the army can't deploy 76,000 undeployable. You can't get a division out of that. There's no way you can get a division out of the army at 76,000. It's not deployable. It wasn't really deployable in Afghan. I think we had less than when I was in Afghan. We had less than 10,000 people deployed. That was the maximum. I think they couldn't deploy more than 8,500. To be
We
fair.
only really had Camp Bastion, right, for most of the time. Like one camp.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something. Even the Navy now
It's a
with
small
deploying
effort.
ships. But the problem that I've got as a British man, and you guys obviously the same, is that we can berate this, but we're berating ourselves. The failure here is ourselves failing to stand up. You're talking about, you going and you're going to stand up and represent yourself and hopefully be elected. And you are doing something positive. But there's not enough British people doing something positive here. And we should be. We should be saying, no, we're not going to tolerate this. And it's not just voting out the uni party. And I don't know necessarily what it is, other than I've got a big thing about activists that wave a flag. It's like, well done. What essay did you write? What podcast did you go on? What YouTube video did you do? I mean, what did you do? Wave the flag because I thought it was important that we support people in Palestine. Well done. I'll clap you out and then go back to your work and you're never going to do anything again. We should be, as British people, saying this is not good enough. And it is not good enough, by the way. I don't know many British people that say it is, whether we're talking about immigration that we had no vote on before, whether we're talking about the intentional demise of our core public sector services, some of which in the military, that we really need to provide. Because the military is one place where, this is why the meritocracy is so important. Young, impoverished British kids go to the military and it takes them out of that poverty. And then they come out and then they go and they just struggle and they go and do something good with their lives. And that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't got into the military in the first place. I think the only part of the military I can see that's actually pushing it back against this in some ways is the Royal Marines at the moment. And they're getting smaller and smaller. The army's all over this stuff. You speak to young army officers, they're loving this diversity stuff. And they hit me all the time on Twitter. Mental people. The Navy, flags on warships.
Just mention you were an officer in the Navy before
I was in the Navy, yeah.
So you know actually both.
Absolutely, yeah. And then obviously I was in the Navy 5 years, Air Force 15 years. So the Navy's got all these flags flying. I remember people saluting this LGBT flag at shore establishment. And someone wrote to me and he's like, I was in that picture. What were you doing? And this guy's got his head down. You might have seen the picture like that. I said, what were you doing? He says, with hindsight, that was completely the wrong thing to do. He went back and he went to his boss and he said, what are we doing saluting LGBT flags? And his boss eventually went, yeah, it's a fair point. So I think we've got good people that
level of ignorance.
They don't have time to think about it. They literally are busy with their work, their families. A lot of these people are quite young, so they're building their careers. And it's up to people that have got that capacity to come on shows or to write or to actually kind of say, hang on, guys, we can think about this. We are British. We can, when I'm in my gym, I've got the flag of the Union, so the Union flag, and I've also got the English flag. And as I said earlier to you, my wife sometimes says, you've got the English flag up there. It's a bit football, Tim, isn't it? I'm like, it's your flag. You don't have another flag. What do you mean it's a bit football? It's your flag. It's the English flag. You know how many people have died under that flag and been carried off the battlefield in that flag? We joke about this shit, but it's funny until it's you that's dying under that flag. And that's why I get quite serious about it. People don't understand the emotion that around. There are British men and women out there that understand exactly what I'm saying. And they really do. And I know someone that would be tearful right now because they understand what I'm saying. And yet they're kind of ridiculed. And yet that's the core backbone of this country. These people are being ridiculed by their government, by the elites. That I don't want to get into that whole kind of thing, but it's when you see this happening, it's just so wrong on so many levels.
Well, you hit on a fantastic point there, especially in a way to phrase this, because we've spoken about diversity and the damage it does in every aspect of society, whether that's financial or just the immoral aspect of saying to a young candidate who was born in the year like 2002, that because of historic racism, you can't be in the civil service. What are you talking about? But
that's sad, is it?
In an incident like this, you're a murderer. Like, I'm sorry, you've actually caused people's deaths because of your ideological obsessions. And in which case, this isn't even funny anymore. This is murder, in my view, after what you've explained there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd go, it's not, so you just
if
have
you
to
know
wait.
What you do will cause to needless death.
I don't think they're very clever.
Oh, I'm talking about someone who would know that. So we're looking at the cabinet level.
Do they know that? Are we saying these people are clever? If you look at what Grant Shapps is saying recently, he's not a clever guy. He's saying recently that he thinks the military should be representative of the population it serves, which is an absolute fucking nonsense. let's be honest about
Doesn't make any
this.
sense.
It doesn't make any sense. What, you want disabled people in there? People that can't hear anything? Blind people? Come on.
yeah.
Let's
Did you
be
hear about
obvious
this in
it.
Germany?
No, what was that?
So the parliament said this, some
Did
parliamentarian.
they really?
And the AFD got up and went, yes, of course, we must get tanks that are able to have pregnant women in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And then they quickly realized how stupid that was.
It is stupid. And this is what I mean. So people, this is Grant Shapps. I mean, this is Ben Wallace. Ben Wallace was championing this stuff.
Didn't the American Air Force actually make flight suits for
They did.
pregnant women?
They did. But the thing is, you can't fly pregnant women. So when
Right.
the moment that Tory, I mean, she's under 9 Gs. The G pants she's wearing here, what you don't see on Tory right here, you see the G pants that are going to squeeze her G, and it's going to give her about 2 Gs worth of protection. It's going to keep enough blood in her brain to keep her conscious, because the brain, being a clever thing, is going to shut itself down first. It goes, I just want to protect the heart and lungs, because that's what it does. So let's switch the brain off. Unconscious death within about 4 or 5 seconds in one of those aircraft, because of course it hits the sea, doesn't it? But what you don't see Tory wearing is this thing on her chest that compresses her chest. Now she gets forced breathing comes in. It's unique to the Typhoon. I didn't ever wear it. And then the cell wall, but the wall between the outer body and the inner body is compressed, again, to hold blood into the brain, because it's pulling 9G, sustaining 9G, one of the most powerful aircraft we fly. And so now she's pregnant, and now we're compressing the body, and we're expecting her not to miscarry. She will. It's a wonder she gets pregnant in the first place, to be fair, because that is not a conducive environment to it. Most women are on the pill when they're flying, because obviously, moods and everything else, they take the pill. You've got to come off the pill to start that. Mood swings, everything. It's just not.
Like, you have to know nothing to think that you need a flight suit for pregnant
I
women.
don't think they know anything. I think these people are so stupid. I think the problem that we have is we don't realize how stupid these people are. I think that's the big thing. I think we literally need to turn around and go, I do this on Twitter sometimes, like, I can't communicate with you on the same. I don't know whether you're 4 because you're called Bambi Girl 26, whatever. I don't know who you are, but we're coming at it like this, mate. You know what I mean? So how are we even starting to communicate? I sometimes say, right, just pretend I'm wrong, but you're right. Can we? No, you can't, because you're an activist. I mean, I don't know how we can even have this conversation. But if we don't have the conversation, if we allow these people to basically, what happens with us is we just give up. We're like, you're an idiot, I'll go off on somewhere else. And so we never push. At least you're doing something about it. You're going in and saying, I want to be in politics and I want to put myself forward and hopefully I can make some change. Most people, the hassle factor, because these people never go away. There's an army of them, because they don't need to educate themselves, because we can sit on TikTok all day. I said to you earlier, didn't I? If you I get attacked a lot by very young women, not many of them, but some young women come and say I'm a sexist, misogynist, blah, blah, gender transfer, add whatever you want, homophobic. And I say to them, if I put you as young women, and I wish I could, in front of people like Tori, you are a different person. You would not recognize, she could not communicate with you in a way that you'd understand. That woman has trained her entire life. I think she's like grade 9 violin or some shit. She led the debating class at school. The thing about Tori, the problem with Tori that we had is that she hadn't failed anything before. So now you get her, if you put her on a tanker over North Syria and she can't get fuel and she's failing, you don't know how she's going to react. We almost had to fail Tori's sorties for her. Like, she was a good student, but every student makes mistakes. You can fail them in order to get her to understand what failure meant. First attempt in learning. That's all it is. It's just a first attempt to learn. I'd rather she learned in a controlled environment. Now, she's been doing this since she was 8 years old. 8. These women that are criticizing me have done nothing like she's done ever in their lives. If you put them in a room with people like Tori or Sasha and some other women that I train as well, these women would be like, yeah, I realize I'm going to have to shut the fuck up here, because these women here, this is why they're in jets. There's not much else they can talk about, like me, because I'm a jet guy and that's all you do 24/7, 365. That's all you do. Fine, we have to be doing that, else you do kill yourself and your friends if you don't know what you're doing. And these are incredibly complicated machines. But these women that are arguing for more women in the Air Force have never had an experience of the Air Force at all. All Tori wants is good people on her wing to put missiles down range to keep them more safe. She couldn't care whether they're black, white, couldn't care whether they're squirrels. Just wants them on their wing, you know what I mean? So people argue about this and they're coming from a position of absolute ignorance, as you're saying. And I think we give them too much airtime. But I don't know how not to, because all we try and do, of course, is persuade people to understand the nuance and the grey areas so that we can move forward together as British people as well.
You've mentioned her to me before, never named her before, but you've mentioned an anecdote before that there was a female on one of your training squadrons who was so brilliant that she just never failed at anything. You had to deliberately fail her. I now got a face to put to that.
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Tors won't mind me saying.
The true Top Gun.
Yeah, we repeated about 6 trips with her. She was struggling towards the end of the course on a quite a complicated particular phase. And the thing about it is, this is why the airline guys have a go at me. If she passed, she passed. You're flying an airliner, mate. You're not flying a jet. You know what I mean? It's a fundamentally different thing that airline mates find difficult to understand. The problem with going through flying training is you probably could graze every sortie. You could get to the end and we could probably get you through. But if you fell on the front line, you just die.
Right.
So the way the training system used to be was you had to literally had tests. We could really challenge it. And then it became like every sortie was a test really. But the way the civilianization of it did it was very much as long as you get 2, 3 is kind of like a pass. But if you get 2, you can go. And Tori was hitting 2s on quite a lot of things in a particular area. I think it was ground attack, if I remember correctly. And it just got to the stage where instructors were coming up to me saying, we're going to stick her on a Typhoon here. She's getting 2s, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2s. What are we going to do? And it was like, well, if we do this now, if we stop her flying now, like halfway through the course, we can repeat those 6 trips and she'll end on a high. She'll go onto the Typhoon, confidence, all that kind of stuff. She'll do really well. And she's doing really well. She's a great person on there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But you have to take a proactive step. And that's why as a standards officer, you've got to make sometimes a difficult decision. She hadn't actually failed a sortie as such, but she was probably going to end up killing herself or other people if we didn't stop her at some point. That's just how it is.
Very interesting. Feel bad we've concentrated on this one individual.
Sorry, yeah.
No, don't apologise. Because unfortunately we have to move on for time a bit here, don't we? But I did just want to point out.
I do want to say, I'm in love with your realism, if nothing else, that you bring to the conversation, where it's just like, no, you will die. This is how you will die if you don't do this correctly.
Well, Tori knows loads of people that died. I mean, yeah, she's had.
But it's just the point of when I deal with people who are about DEI, you're absolutely right. They're just so stupid. It's not even a comparable conversation.
Yeah.
That they don't know the subject matter at all. They just know 40% women, which I'll have to let them.
One thing, do you know Vice Air Marshal Simon Edwards? Have you heard that name?
Edwards, yeah. He's he was an Air Commodore when I knew him.
Right. I only mentioned him just because on the website, there's any number of things I could reference or point to. On the actual website, there is a quote from him, who is director of people in the RAF.
That was a thing when I was here.
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
Must be a new thing.
Is that a really old, venerable position, or has that been made up in the last bloody 4 years? Okay, right. Director of people, that's so Orwellian. Anyway, and there's the idea that diversity is a strength. It's just, so this is...
He's not a bad dude, Cyber. He's not a bad guy.
Right, I'm sure he's been told to do this.
Of course, they've all been told to say it. Yeah.
He says, our differences make us stronger.
Bollocks.
Yeah, wrong. A lie. That's just not true. That's why the RAF is one of the most inclusive forces in the world. This was recognised when the RAF was named as a top 75 employer in the Social Mobility Foundation.
Top 75? Do you know what number they got? I think it was 74. It was literally like one from bottom or something like that. I remember when he put that tweet out, I remember looking at it and going, oh yeah, you're literally one from bottom. You just scraped in. These people are not bad people. I've communicated with a lot of them. They all think they're doing the right thing. And it helps the fact that he's not going to leave the service and get another job. He's in now. He's past his 20 point. He's in for the pension. So he's got to level up. And that's what does it, unfortunately. People are going to say the right thing so they get promoted because they're on that kind of gravy train.
I don't think I'm disagreeing with you because I'm absolutely not.
No, I'm not saying.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Of course, 100%. But it still kills people.
Yeah, right.
It's still people still die. Right. And that's what we're going to find out in America or in the airline industry pretty soon when they've got this whole thing. I think United Airlines now. Is it United Airlines where the boss is he's a what do they call them? Dresses and wigs and
transvestite.
Yeah, but we used to call them that. They're called something else now, aren't they?
Transgenders.
No, where they they do their things in front of kids, don't they? They go and drag queen. I don't know what the name was anymore. We used to call him something different, didn't we? But no, he's a drag queen and he's the boss of United and he's got this thing where he's bringing 50% black pilots in because of course that's going to make the difference, isn't it? They're just pilots or pilots. But
unfortunately, we do have to move on. But just to reiterate out there, in a week or so, maybe 2, there'll be a 2-hour conversation with me and Tim talking about this in much more detail. So if you found that segment interesting, there will be more to come on Lotus Eaters. But just finally, just to round it off, just say that the RAF did spend millions on DEI, got found out quite quickly that it was just completely illegal, basically, and wrong and discriminatory. And the RAF essentially came out one way or another and said, well, we'd do it again. We were unapologetic. Literally, I think they will say we'll do it again. We did nothing wrong. Unashamed. There we go. The RAF is unashamed at their recruitment processes, which have been shown to be just flatly unfair. And they're going forward sort of pretending there's nothing wrong. And so there you go. There's that segment.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that is on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on Buddhism. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at @lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.